to get my notes just in case. Well, you know what? I guess it struck a little theme here that it was announced that, yes, I have been fired, and I want to thank the people who fired me in the past for helping set me on my true path. Because really, I do feel that with the company I have, even though I've had other companies, this one really makes me happy. And I think it's really special to be able to make something that you feel is really doing something good. And like the gentleman said before, in the cause of social marketing, I think that if you're making something that's needed on the planet, and you know, it just makes marketing all that much easier to come by. Now, let me ask people, does everybody know what a pedicab is? Okay, you've seen them around, and you've seen them in Denver, and you know, maybe you've even seen them on TV. Well, I didn't invent the pedicab. The pedicab was invented by some people in Asia, but I had luckily gone over to Asia, and you know, through the course of life, just come about to develop something that what the Economist magazine later called the state of the art of pedicabs, and really worked in getting those into a lot of Western cities. So I'll tell you about the course of how I came to develop the pedicab business. It was actually, you know, if I look back and say, well, when did I start working on this? It was a long time ago. I mean, when I pull all the different elements of my life together about what went into this company, anyway, this kind of slide shows where I came from. I mean, my undergraduate degree, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, you know, at a time when the environment was really a major concern, and my undergraduate degree was in environmental biology. So I'm a plant ecologist. So that really, you know, it doesn't have really a whole lot to do with pedicabs, except it set me on the course of thinking somewhat ecologically and evolutionary way of thinking rather than kind of a rigid way of thinking. But anyway, this kind of shows you know, one set of worldview, and then this shows another set. And I was lucky early on in the 70s to have gotten a job, and actually I think that in the introduction for me it had something to do how I got lucky. And actually luck plays a great role in my developing my business, because even though I had the goals, you know, you set up, the goals almost set up a pattern for all the lucky circumstances in life to fall into, and they follow a course. And I learned early on that I could set myself up for being lucky. I actually went to Asia the first time by getting a job on a ship, and everybody said, "Boy, Steve, you're really lucky that you got a job on this ship." It was Semester at Sea. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but it used to be run out of the University of Colorado. But the way that luck happened was I was interested in the program. I went up to the office but was late, and so the office was closed. But I noticed when I tapped on the door was a bit ajar, and so I thought, you know, so I pushed the door open, and the receptionist wasn't there, but I walked in anyway, and walked back and heard somebody in the back room, and it was the director of the program talking on the phone. So I waited conveniently till he was through with this phone conversation, and then introduced myself to him. And lo and behold, I got a job working on the ship just by pursuing that door that was ajar. And that kind of just set me to thinking, yeah, I was lucky, but I had to walk through that door and kind of set myself up for luck to happen. So anyway, I end up in India, and you know, I've always been fascinated by the development aspects of the third world, what we call the third world. Actually, it's chock full of ideas. If you ever are lacking in ideas on innovation and people who are very, very smart, just go poking around in Mexico or some of these other places, and you'll be amazed at how industrious and innovative they are. So anyway, this kind of I want you to see some of this imagery because this then was imprinted on my mind of like, oh yeah, these are colorful societies. They have a transportation system that we regard as less than adequate. But you saw the pictures in the pictures before. Those aren't very appealing either. So, you know, I'm somewhere in between these two circumstances here. Now, I was telling you before, my undergraduate degree was in plant ecology. Actually, I went back to the university then and got a degree in resource economics. That has something to do with, I guess, what I'm doing now. But neither degree really prepared me to be an entrepreneur. They more or less prepared me to work for the government. I mean, certainly being an economist did. And I would have never lasted there for long, I'll tell you that. But anyway, I wanted to just kind of juxtapose these pictures again because it kind of shows where two parts of society are coming from. And the picture on the left is the Los Angeles River as it runs through Los Angeles. Now, this is our engineering world. The engineers designed this river. This is a very efficient river on the left. There's no obstacles. They took all the rocks out because they just impede the water and everything like that. Well, the river on the right is a regular river, a naturally evolved river. And this is the river I like. And next, you'll see what this has to do with transportation, which is something that I'm really interested in. This is the engineered path on the left. You can see it has a little bit of similarity to the Los Angeles River. And then to the right, you see the picture of a scene in Bangladesh. And it's very colorful and kind of chaotic. But yet, it's a really lively ecosystem. I mean, there's a lot of commerce. There's a lot that happens here, and this city actually works. I mean, these places that we think of being a little bit more chaotic are very functional ecosystems. And I think that there's two ways of approaching entrepreneurism and approaching how we resolve the problems in our society. One is a very engineering approach of saying, okay, we're going to take this rigid path here, like towards hydrogen fuels, and just have everything, a centralized planning authority direct us just down this one path. Or we can say we take a rather evolutionary approach and just kind of let the chips fall where they may, and that's just allowing the little different ideas to spring up like the pedicabs. Now, later on, you will see that the pedicab idea was treated kind of like, oh, this noxious weed in the garden by the city of New York. Like, we never planned on pedicabs, so let's extract this weed. Well, a lot of cities don't like the pedicabs. Why? Because they're like little rocks in the river that impede the flow of traffic. The traffic engineers hate them. But when it gets right down to it, the traffic engineers only like one thing, and that's moving traffic through cities. They don't like pedestrians. They don't like crosswalks. They don't like a lot of stuff because they measure their success everywhere they go by how fast traffic is moving. But that's not how an ecosystem works. I mean, an ecosystem works by people interacting and everything like that, like you saw along the river. So anyway, that's kind of shows where I'm coming from, what I've experienced. I've bumped heads a lot with the traffic engineers around cities in America as, the pedicabs have gotten their start. When I was starting this business, I actually, through my economics degree and everything, got quite involved in working with cities and working as an urban planner. And I worked with a lot of developers. And I always came back to wanting to work in the most urban, dense areas. I really wanted to work with the pedestrian, how to get pedestrian spaces to work. Because in the late 80s, there weren't really that many pedestrian spaces that worked. I mean, the whole environmental shift was kind of coming about saying, hey, we need more pedestrians. They're nice, they make cities work. And so they started closing off streets like Pearl Street in Boulder or the 16th Street Mall in Denver. Well, they did this throughout the country, but in most places it didn't work. And the fact that it worked in the 16th Street Mall in Denver, in Boulder, led to something in Boulder called the Pedestrian Conference. And it was just a few of us people who got together. It was a really very small group of people, but it ultimately evolved, and I think, evolved into things like the Congress of New Urbanism. But it was people who were studying how pedestrianism worked. Well, I had just, because, again, as luck happens, I go here, I go there. I happened to be on up in Aspen, and I saw some guy with a pedicab. And I thought, great, a pedicab in America. That's fantastic. So a friend of mine who's a planner in the city of Aspen let me know how to get a hold of this guy. And I said, hey, I want to bring down this pedicab to the city of Boulder for the pedestrian conference. Of course, he needed money. We needed money for the insurance and things. And so I called up the Boulder Auto Hotel and talked to their marketing department. Again, a lot of static. I happened to see Frank Day walking through the lobby. Hey, Frank, I need your sponsorship for this. That's another lesson for me. Never stop at the marketing department. Always go to the top guy, the more entrepreneurial people. They have a gut feeling of what will work. Right away, the answer was yes. He'd sponsored this pedicab coming down to the pedestrian conference that was going to be around his hotel. So we got this pedicab from Aspen down to Boulder for this conference, and I hired a student, who was going to pedal people around. It actually wasn't that big a hit at the conference because these people were all into pedestrianism, and they were a little bit almost too judgmental of like, is that a good idea or not? Well, the student said, Steve, can I take this down to Denver on a Friday night? I go, it's insured. Yeah, why not? So this is set myself up for luck again. So he takes it down there on a Friday night, and later on I asked him how it went. He goes, great, I made $100 with all the drunk people and people who have been drinking at the Wine Coop Brewing Company because they're too lazy to walk back over to the 16th Street Mall. I thought, eureka. We found it, $100, that sets up a little cash flow thing. And he goes, I want to buy this thing from you. And I said, it's not so fast. And so I kind of got it set up, and actually John Hickenlooper, I went and talked to him. He owned the Wine Coop Brewing Company, and said, how would you like to sponsor this thing? He thought it was a good idea. So I had my first advertising sponsor in Denver. And actually, to let you know something, I often call these things billboards disguised as a mode of transportation. I mean, I actually not only have Main Street pedicabs, but I have Main Street Outdoor. I had to set up another advertising company kind of on the side to support it. So that's how it got started in Denver. So all the pedicabs you see down there got started by some kid asking me if he could borrow the pedicab and coming back and telling me that he made $100. And so I'm a little bit more methodical. I just didn't want to let this thing out into the hands of one guy who probably had no more intention than using it a few times, getting some quick money. I wanted to plant the seed deeper, so I worked at the city of Denver. The Denver partnership was great. Actually, they were a lot better than the city of Denver because they really had more of a business mentality and knew what it took to really make cities work. And so they were very helpful to me. One thing I did in getting permission from the Downtown Denver Partnership was to, writing this whole thing was, they had this program that came out called the Downtown Denver Capital Corporation. And even though I didn't need any money, I borrowed $10,000 from them. Because in my business plan that I had to present to them, I wanted to make sure that they knew I was dependent on advertising revenue to pay their loan back. Because I needed permission to be on the 16th Street Mall. And I didn't want them to say, you can't advertise on the pedicabs on the 16th Street Mall. Because I thought, that could be a really kind of a dicey thing, getting billboards running up and down the 16th Street Mall. I'm sure somebody would have objected to that idea somewhere around the place, because it happens all over the place that they don't like billboards. So I got that into my business plan. They approved my business plan. They loaned me the money. I thought, I'm set. They can't tell me now I can't advertise, otherwise their loan won't get paid back. And so we've been on the 16th Street Mall ever since. I quickly paid back their loan within probably 6 months. And that set me up for another stroke of luck, because they reported in the newspaper that I was the first successful candidate for this program. So they're crowing about the success of the Denver Downtown Capital Corporation. They've already launched their first business, got their first loan completely paid back, and it was picked up by NBC News, who did a little blurb, and this was really before the internet. This was like in 1992, and did a little story about the pedicabs, which was seen nationally. So I started getting my first national phone calls like, where did you get those things? And at the time, it was still the guy up in Aspen actually had two, and I had found some others around the country. And actually, I wasn't the first person to make them in America. Some guy in Washington State had made some for the World's Fair in Vancouver. And so there were a few of these floating around, so I by no means was the first to make them in America or to operate them here. But what some kid said to me, again, all my ideas are somebody else's really, he goes, what would really be cool is a mountain bike pedicab. And I thought, that would really be cool. And so I set out to make the world's first mountain bike pedicab. But I didn't even know what a bottom bracket was. I really didn't know how to make a bike. I didn't know how to do anything. So I went to CU, to the engineering class, and talked a professor into making it a class project. And so we made a class project out of making a mountain bike pedicab. And it took a couple semesters, and to tell you the truth, they got it pretty far down the road, and they got CAD drawings of the tubing we needed and things like that. But again, the engineering mind, I was up against the engineering mind because the cab looked absolutely square. So for any of the stylistic curves and curvature that you see in the pedicab, I will take credit for that. Otherwise, it would have been a big square box. It just sat on the pedicab. But here you can see some of the little innovative things we did. We have hydraulic disc brakes on the back. We couldn't use simply bicycle brakes. They're just not powerful enough. So we got those from the go-kart industry. That's a differential drive, so it makes the turning radius really tight. We had to re-engineer the wheels. That's a 48-spoke wheel, which is pretty uncommon in the bike industry. Extra wide hubs. We had to make a lot of innovative changes. So that's how the first pedicab, mountain bike pedicab, got made. The other thing that Denver really did for me was they miscalculated walking distance everywhere. And you can see this in everything that you read about urban developments. They'll say it's within walking distance of this or walking distance of that. Actually, walking distance is not even defined in planning literature. In fact, Peter Park and some other planners were up in front of a panel in Denver, and I raised my hand and asked, what is walking distance? And even they at this panel couldn't agree. You know, a quarter mile, that's about the shortest. Some people think it's a half mile. Well, the Coors Field is about a quarter of a mile. It's 4 blocks from the Market Street station in downtown Denver, where the buses stop at the end of the 16th Street Mall. And then people end up walking through Lodo, which basically doesn't have sidewalks. I mean, it's an old warehouse district. And I'll tell you, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, you would just park the pedicab at the Market Street station, and people would just hop in and ride over to Coors Field. It was just a wonderful stroke of luck for me that they just kind of plopped this thing there. I was getting phone calls asking people saying, will you meet us at Market Street Station? I'm bringing my father, and we don't want to walk the rest of the way to the game. And it was really amazing to me how many people were planning on using the pedicab if they took the mass transit to downtown Denver. Well, Denver continued to really work with me on the development of my business by when they put in light rail. They put the light rail stop 4 blocks away from the stadium. They did the same thing with respect to Invesco Field. The light rail doesn't go to Invesco Field. It goes within walking distance, but that's not, as long as you missed the walking distance definition by about 5% of the population, that's good enough for me. And, and cities throughout the country have been doing this too. In fact, it was really funny because the city of Boulder bought this property at Pearl Street and 30th for their transit development. Their whole community that's going to be organized around, I forget what they call it, transit development or something like that. And then they found out it was on the curve of the track and that they can't stop the train there. So they're going to stop the train actually a quarter of a mile down the track from this community. But again, the planner was quoted, "That's okay, it's within walking distance." I thought, right on. I'll go to Boulder and I'll solve their problem for them. So anyway, this was happening throughout the country. Now, I hope you can see in this picture, this is kind of to reflect, this is a great satisfaction to me. On the left, you have Muhammadu. He's from Nigeria. I walked up to him in New York City, and he's obviously trying to pitch me a pedicab ride and everything like that, because he had never met me. I'd talked to him plenty of times on the phone, and I asked him his name, or I finally introduced myself, and he goes, "Steve Meyer?" He goes, "Oh," he was ready to take me anywhere. I mean, I transformed his life in New York City by creating a pedicab business for him. He is living the American dream. He owns his own pedicab. He owns his own business. He was a janitor before this. He's making his way through school. He's trying to make his way. In fact, most of the drivers in New York City, has anybody seen the pedicabs in New York City? I mean, was it an American driver? No. They're all these foreign guys, and I'll tell you, they just pick up on this so fast. It's like, this is my ticket. I will own my own business in America. And he's just as happy as can be, and I was so proud when he was just, doing his thing by giving me a tour of New York City in his pedicab, compliments of Muhammadu Pedicab Service. On the lower down, you'll see Peter Meitzler. He was my partner starting Manhattan Rickshaw. Peter couldn't borrow money when I met him. He kind of met me as a result of that first television thing I was telling you about. And he made he sought me out and everything. And finally, one time I met him, and he came to Denver and hung out in Denver for a while, rode a pedicab for me in Denver, and then said, "Steve, can you lend me a pedicab? I want to go to New York City." And I, lend a pedicab? I know that's kind of risky, but I thought, oh, well, okay, I will. So I'm setting myself up to be lucky again. And so he took a pedicab to New York City. Then he wanted like 20 pedicabs in New York City. I thought again, well, I'll do it. I mean, I'm going to be your partner, right, in this business? Yeah, we got it all set up. So Peter and I had Manhattan Rickshaw in New York City. Again, it's kind of a leap of faith, but right away we started getting advertising. Altoids actually picked us up, and we actually got written up in a marketing book for this Altoids campaign, and the director of Leo Burnett said, we chose pedicabs because of the tagline on Altoids said, curiously strong, and we thought that would make, because the drivers of the pedicabs are curiously strong, we thought it was a good connection. That was good enough for us. So we did the Altoids campaign, and this marketing thing, the director of Leo Burnett said, or this advertising guy from Leo Burnett said, the pedicabs turned the heads of the most jaded New Yorkers. So that started my advertising career. So again, that was Peter Meisler. So this all sets us up for the next little stroke of luck. Peter calls me up one day and said, this TV show wants to use our pedicabs. And I go, what TV show? And he goes, The Apprentice. I go, I've never heard of it. And he goes, yeah, well, what do we do? How much do we charge them? I go, well, what do they want to use the pedicabs for? And they go, well, they're going to do this business competition. Like, they're going to have these two teams that use the pedicabs to compete with each other. I go, well, let's just, if we're going to get on TV, why don't we just let them use the pedicabs? I don't care. So we said, okay. And now, that's something you can't see here, but if I...
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Morning. Now, this is going to be interesting today. Transportation in New York City is a basic disaster. Getting around in the city is tough. It doesn't get any tougher anywhere in the world. Each team is going to manage a fleet of pedicabs. Starting tomorrow, for one 8-hour shift, you must design and implement a business plan to increase revenue for the pedicab company. The shift ends promptly at 6 p.m., no later. At the end of the day, we'll find out who makes the most money by managing the fleet. It's very simple. The losing team will see me in the boardroom. Somebody's getting fired.
All right, Warnock. Well on our way, baby. I'm putting myself in for a horrible loss and possibility of getting terminated. So I've weighed the risk and the reward, and at this stage of the game, I need to hit a home run.
Somebody got fired. Actually, it was Heidi in this episode. I don't know, does anybody remember this episode? Now, Bill was the one who ended up actually winning the season 1, and his team thought of advertising on the pedicabs, and the other team didn't. Now, I cannot really understand how anybody cannot think of advertising in Times Square, but hey, that's what separates the winners from the losers, right, in this episode. So, you know what? We never wrote a business plan, but not only did these guys write the business plan, they broadcast it to 30 million people. So that was good enough for me. So that was a stroke of luck. And again, we set it up just by, getting started in New York City and lending the pedicabs and lending the TV show, The Pedicabs. By the way, we will be on The Apprentice again. I think in the next season, they've used the pedicabs again one more time. And every time Gillette or somebody else uses their company, they have to pay like $1 million or something. That's the product placement fee on The Apprentice. But they keep coming back to us for free. So we did them a nice turn. So anyway, the advertising thing takes off up in the upper right. You can see, if you look in the background, you see that's the Sydney Opera House. So Yahoo comes to us and says, we're doing this guerrilla marketing campaign around the 2000, actually this is before The Apprentice. This is in 2000. The Apprentice was in 2004. But they wanted to advertise around the Olympics. So these are guerrilla marketing or ambush marketing tools for companies like Yahoo. They were not Olympic sponsors, yet by dumping these pedicabs into Sydney, giving free rides, Sydney really couldn't do anything about it. They're bicycles. You can't just start kicking bicycles off the road, especially in these green times. And they were giving absolutely free rides. Nothing wrong with that. The other thing that Yahoo was doing is they were taking everybody's picture and putting it on their website so that people could download their little souvenir photo of the pedicab ride in Sydney. So it went viral. They had like 10,000 pictures on their website. So, and our pedicabs went viral too. We've done work every year for the New Yorker magazine. Down here, if you look, you can see I've done work for Coors for a long time. I've done Bud. Beer advertising has been a staple of the pedicab industry. We did Shark Week, so we dressed up all the pedicabs in these shark costumes and then just drove them around New York City. But since nobody wants to get into a shark mouth, we just had to charge Discovery Channel, because they were advertising Shark Week, for just our guys just driving around New York City for 2 weeks. And they did a little clever thing. They put up lifeguard stands like in Times Square, and every time they saw us coming, they'd start yelling, "Shark, shark." So we became part of this street theater of New York, which was a lot of fun. And let me just advance through here. I got another...
Let's hear it for Bama Santa from Alabama. Here he comes. Give him a big round of applause. Let's hear it for Arizona with a cactus hat. Spiky.
I think that's our record, 50 pedicabs for one organized thing. Just last weekend, we did 40 pedicabs for Janus in New York City, and it's all set up in Colorado here. The guy who does all of Janus's work actually has an office right across the street from me. I met him at a basketball game, and we just started talking, and he has this promotion company. He does something for Janus, so we set this thing up around the New York City triathlon where we have 40 pedicabs. It's the only green, carbon-free way of shuttling people 2 miles between Riverside Park and Central Park. Otherwise, they'd have to hire buses. So we get these 40 pedicabs going back and forth, all wrapped in Janus logos. Actually, you missed, well, you might have missed her. I just hit that. Oh, that's Jennifer Aniston. So she's helped promote our company in her last movie, which was a big bust. I forget what it was even called, Bounty Hunter, I think. So she hijacks a pedicab to get away from her boyfriend. So here's Jennifer Aniston riding pedicab. But every little bit helps, you know. Now, even the bad publicity helps. So I have to show you an example of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the one, the only Richard Simmons. Come on out.
It was actually really good for us because it showed the tight turning radius of the pedicab.
In traffic-clogged New York, the pedicab can often be the fastest way to travel.
Is this your first pedicab ride?
It is.
What do you think?
I think it's pretty neat.
But New York City doesn't completely agree, fearing the pedicab situation is out of control.
If you're going to conduct business on our streets, that's a privilege. It's not a right. And we don't allow that to go on unregulated.
Up to now, if you wanted to drive a pedicab, you could have. It was open season. New York City wants to change that, slashing the number of pedicab drivers in New York.
In half, from as many as 600 down to 325.
So anyway, all this time goes by. Now there's 600 pedicabs in New York. I started selling them to other people because rather than have them start their own pedicab company or making their own pedicabs, I just was selling them to my competition because Peter didn't want to manage any more pedicabs. And so all of a sudden it occurs to us, we never asked for permission. So we've been operating in New York City all this time, and There's no law on the books. There's no nothing. And now there's 600 pedicabs, so they're starting to get noticed. You know, the first few pedicabs go by, the cops would just look at them and go, what's that? But I'll tell you, who noticed was the taxi industry. And they wanted to get rid of us. And so, and we wanted regulation. Actually, we opened the door ourselves because the industry was out of control. I mean, these people were flying in by the jumbo jet because in Turkey, it was like, hey, we can get a job in America driving a pedicab. You don't need anything. You just go and rent these pedicabs from these guys, and you can ride around, and you can come home at the end of the summer with $100. You know, and that's really good enough. It was kind of disconcerting to a lot of the starving actors and things who had been our pedicab drivers, but the word got out, and these people were coming over by droves and riding the pedicabs, and they were going the wrong way down one-way streets, and were going, listen, guys, really, you got to kind of obey the rules here, and you got to turn on some lights at night. Oh, but that takes a battery. Yeah, but, you know, it's good. It's good for business. It's good for everybody. People were having, like, the Nigerians claimed one corner. No, you guys can't do that. You can't claim a corner. The corners belong to everybody. No, this is our corner. No. So we go to the city and we want regulation. But the thing is, we open Pandora's box. Because once it's announced that you're getting regulated, who stepped in but the lobbyists? And who can pay the lobbyists? The taxi industry. And so we're going to get eliminated. And, but lucky for me, I, again, setting myself up for luck, go to this dinner in downtown Denver for the International Business Circle. I don't know if any of you have heard of that little club. And who do I sit next to but the editor for The Economist? And he asks me what I do, and I tell him about pedicabs, and he perks up. I'm a little embarrassed because, I mean, here's this, you know, editor of a big business magazine, but he was really interested, and he goes, you mean all those little guys in New York? I go, yeah. And then I told him you're not going to see him anymore because we're up against the taxi industry. And so he wrote about us in The Economist. So now I'm getting phone calls from Spain because they read about me in The Economist magazine and whatever. And luckily, we have a big friend of our side, Mayor Bloomberg. He believes in entrepreneurism. He is really a great mayor. We were up against all the little political hacks, you know, who get elected from whatever borough. They're pretty cheap, actually, you know. A few $1,000 here and there goes a long way in the city council in New York. And you wouldn't believe, when people want to look closely at the videos and hear some of the commentary, you know, surrounding these meetings, it's actually kind of funny. Because you would think, I don't think people could pay me enough to just say some of the things that people said at these city council meetings. Like this one city councilman said, the pedicabs are even more polluting than the taxis because they hold up the taxis. And if I could show you a video, it's actually another thing that was on the Discovery Channel called the Eco Smackdown. It was a race between a pedicab and a taxi in New York between 2 points. And I'll tell you, as long as you include a crosstown little aspect to your journey in New York, the pedicabs will win every time. And I mean, in fact, when the taxi lobby made a video against us, they were going how we're obstructing traffic in New York City. And even as the guy speaks, you see a pedicab go by him in the background when the traffic is stopped. And, you know, so I mean, it's totally absurd because these things go snaking through the traffic and you can really get around. In fact, there's another clip I didn't include here. You can see all these on YouTube of Ellen DeGeneres pedicab. If you go there, it's like she hops out of a taxi cab going, this is ridiculous, throws him the money, goes and runs and hops into a pedicab. I mean, all this stuff is becoming part of the little popular culture now in New York City. It's like these things are the way to get around, and yet they're claiming we're causing more pollution than the taxis, that we're holding up the traffic. Like, traffic is holding up in traffic. Why don't you eliminate everybody at the front end of it or whatever? I mean, this isn't making any sense. Well, Bloomberg eliminates it, the city council overrides the veto, and then we sue New York City. The little pedicabs companies have, believe it or not, gotten big enough to form their own organization, the New York Pedicab Owners Association. We got the money together to hire our own legal team, our own lobbyists, so to speak, and we sue New York City and we win. So the city council has to go back again and try to put a cap on the pedicabs. But now, at least we're capped at 900 pedicabs. So it's capped. It will grow no more in New York City. But that's that story. But you can see why the taxi industry is so concerned about these little guys running around picking up their fares in New York City. A taxi medallion in New York City, the right to operate one taxi in New York City, costs $766,000. So this is almost unbelievable. I know you wouldn't even believe me if I told you that. That's why I had to copy it and put it here. This is 2009 or something. I mean, the total industry, so this is cap and trade. They cap the number of taxi cabs at $12,000. Anybody who owns a taxi basically has this medallion, and then they trade. Now they trade for $766,000. That's how valuable the cap on the taxi industry has made each taxi cab medallion. It's phenomenal. It's over $8 billion worth of just rights in the taxi industry. And that's one of our Manhattan rickshaw drivers right there. And that concludes my presentation. If anybody wants to come up here and look at some of these videos, there's really a good one at the end here. Actually, I'll play it. You can just hear it.
As chairman of the Committee on Environmental Protection, I'm here to say that these cause more congestion and, in fact, more air pollution.
If anything, I think that pedicabs are a solution to the environmental and traffic problems facing the city.
Get a hack license and drive a taxi.
Pedicab situation in the theater district and on the roadways in Manhattan is chaotic and dangerous.
Is there some dangers? Believe me, I get out of the way of the yellow cabs.
It's almost like some of the provisions were put in to kill the pedicab industry itself.
I point out that there's probably never been a mayoral veto in the history of the world that wasn't immediately overridden.
We will have order in the chamber. This is a warning.
New York City should become the pedicab capital of the United States.
Yeah. Actually, in Boston, we couldn't start the pedicab business because they were going to make us buy medallions to operate the pedicabs. Obviously, we can't buy a medallion even in Boston where they're substantially cheaper. But what got us into Boston was they had the Democratic Convention there in 2004. And all of a sudden, taxis and a lot of vehicles aren't allowed in front of the Fleet Center. It was an emergency. They needed pedicabs, and we obliged and got pedicabs. It came about by mayoral edict in Boston that they needed pedicabs for the Democratic Convention in 2004. So otherwise, all the people, press people couldn't get from the hotels that are mere walking distance from the Fleet Center to the Fleet Center with their cameras and things like that.
That's more luck, right?
More luck. You know, we're just set up. I mean, we've got kicked out of Las Vegas, the pedicabs. Actually, it was kind of a good thing because it was totally out of control. There were no standards for the pedicabs. People were making their own pedicabs. They were just these ramshackle things. And it was a nightmare on the Strip because absolutely no control. And I think that Clark County, which controls the Strip, let it get that way because they wanted to make a good case for getting rid of them altogether. And the taxi industry in Las Vegas is very powerful. You want proof of that? Try taking the monorail from the airport someplace. The monorail doesn't go to the airport in Las Vegas. That's a logical place for the monorail to go, but it won't go there ever as long as the taxis, they make just too much money taking people from the airport. But anyway, now just last week I got a call from Henderson, Nevada. They have a big convention center and a big event center down there. And they were going, we want you to bring pedicabs down to this big event we're having. And I said, well, you know, I'd be real excited to hear from you, except we all got kicked out in Las Vegas. So if I show up on the streets of Henderson, the police are just going to kick us off. And they go, no, it was the police who recommended we call you. So, hey, they have to, again, I think they miscalculated walking distance in some of their parking lots or some of their planning down there. So we come to, I kind of think of ourselves as the universal connector. You know, like everybody is confounded because everybody has a big wire that goes from their plug, you know, through this wire, and then you try to plug it into your phone and it's like, not the right connector. Well, it's kind of like our mass transit systems. I mean, they're all the same, but they don't connect. They'll never get you the final 4 or 5 blocks to wherever you want to go. And we're just kind of like, open up a can of pedicabs, dump it into the mix, problem solved. So at least we're hoping more cities think of us that way. Thank you.